Hi everyone, it's Noah here from Nueva Armenia, and today I'd like to talk about 7-tone equal temperament, also called 7-EDO, 7-EDO, or a tuning that has 7 equal parts per octave. Let's listen. So we want to talk about why is this tuning interesting, where does it come from, what history does it have, why do I use it, what can we do with it, and what's the deal with this instrument and this tuning. So the tuning is really interesting because we can actually hear it in different folk traditions, different music from around the world. And an important example is in Thai music has often been referred to as having very near 7 equal tuning, and even some musicians saying that the tuning is exactly 7 equal. In the early 20th century, there were some studies done in Mozambique, near Inhambane, with the Chopi musicians who found that they use a very near 7 equal tuning that tends to deviate depending on which town the music is in. In my own experience, learning the Fulani Tambin in Gambia from some Guinean musicians, their music structure is very similarly based to a 7 equal tuning, although with the overtone structure of the tambin flutes, it has a near 7 equal tuning as well. And as well with the music from the country of Georgia, some people said that 7 equal tuning works almost like a kind of an axis between different structures, almost somewhere between just intonation, which is a tuning based on rational harmonics, and 7 equal tuning as almost different metaphors, different concepts that we can use to consider tuning. And I really like 7 with the idea of it being some kind of a metaphor or a concept for how we can imagine tuning. In this case, with this jarana made by La Roria GC in Santiago Tuxtla, una jarana mosquito from Mexico. It's in near 7 tuning as well. The idea was for it to be 7 equal, but with the structure of the instrument, the tuning tends to change a little bit. But that's something that's not necessarily bad. That's something that we can take advantage with, because with 7 equal as a basis, especially considering different types of music around the world, we can see that its flexibility tends to be approximated better when we move the pitches around in different ways. So one of the reasons is that if we imagine 7 tones per octave, dividing the octave into 7 parts, which is, if we use cents to measure, then we're having 1200 cents divided by 7, which gives us something around a tone between 150 and 200 cents. So we get this kind of neutral tone. And with 2 of them, so we're actually getting really close to around 180 cents, 185, and we end up getting this neutral tone, a neutral tone, and this neutral third. So the neutral third is somewhere in between this major and the minor, and depending on how we tune different strings, we can change to a major or a minor mode without too many problems. So this is one of the useful things about the neutral third, and especially the flexible tunings, is we're able to get these 3 third identities, which kind of give us an abstract way of looking at music. So with the 3 different identities being major, neutral, and minor, for example, the same neutral third, in certain situations we can tune a bit sharp and it will take the role of being major. In certain situations we can tune it a bit flat and it will take the role of being minor. Even sometimes the exact same tuning of this neutral third can change its own identity and can change its sound based on the chord progression, which makes this neutral type of harmony really interesting for these different type of psychoacoustic effects. The other thing that we'll notice in this tuning is that the 4th and the 5th are 1 tone apart, and since we know that this tone is a bit less than 200 cents, which is about the approximate distance that we have from the 4th and the 5th, about 204 if we're in just intonation, but we're pretty flat of that with this tone. So this means that we have a sharp 4th and a flat 5th, neither of which are really ideal for most types of music. However, sometimes we can benefit from an effect of having those intervals not quite in tune. We don't always need everything to be in tune in just intonation for its octaval effect for all types of music. There's different positives to having that amount of beating with different instruments, but it's something to know, and also one of the reasons why this type of music tends to get near 7 and not be exactly 7, because really seeing this flexibility of having basically all neutral tones, a neutral second, a neutral third, a fourth and a fifth, which are either sharp or flat, a neutral 6, a neutral 7, and the octave here is not quite in tune, but if we imagine, we have all of these different types of neutral tones, and the deviation of those gives us a lot of freedom of how to have a more flexible tuning in a structure that's different from 12, and it can still give us very similar diatonic structures that work in a fundamentally different way because of the 7-tone structure. And it's interesting that a lot of musics tend to have pentatonic or heptatonic scales as a melodic or like a design basis. And it's interesting also that when making moments of symmetry, when using a generator interval, an interval that's cycled repeatedly to make different scales, we end up with these moments of symmetry, a term coined by Irv Wilson, which means that there's two different step sizes in the scale, in the most simplest way to understand moments of symmetry. And the first two moments of symmetry that really have a strong usage are 5 and 7. We get moments of symmetry in 2 tones, in 3 tones, and then we get 5, 7, and then we get 12 using a normal size fifth of around 700 cents, even a bit sharp, even a bit flat. And some of these, the boundaries of these end up being on 5 and 7 in terms of ranges of the fifth and terms of categories of tuning that we can use that have similar properties. So at one of these levels we find this 7 equal tuning. We also find 5 equal tunings in different parts of the world as well. So in some ways it makes us want to think, why are these pentatonic and heptatonic structures not only really meaningful in an equal tempered way, but that they also appear in a non-equal form in using the fifth being cycled, and that they tend to appear in all sorts of different musics in different uses. Of course, they're not the only types of scales that exist. Of course, there's things that have 6 notes or 8 notes or have a different amount of notes per scale, or forms that aren't based on the fifth or aren't based on these types of structures at all. But we do find them recurrently in music that could have little to nothing to do with the other music. So it does give us some kind of curiosity. So to talk a little bit about this instrument, I'm tuning the outside strings to the same, so something like a G. I don't know where the reference pitch is right now, and I usually tune this next one step above, so they would be something like an A. And I've been tuning this one to a fourth down, so something like an E. But I've been doing it more in just intonation, because if we go by the fourth, we notice that the fourth is a bit sharp from the fourth that I'm actually tuning. And if we notice, this one is going to be somewhere around a major third, because this neutral third is a bit flat, and the fourth is now a bit sharp. So, but we get this nice open chord. So this open chord isn't in an exact an exact 7 equal, but it is somewhere close to it. And we can also do the melodies in something that is near 7 equal. And we've also seen that this isn't an exact 7 equal either, but a lot of times this gives us a cool benefit to kind of see where we can push and pull an instrument and really go back by playing by ear. That's one of the really cool things in microtonality and in working with a new instrument, is we learn a different way to hear different patterns and to see what we come above, and then if we want to later analyze it, we can. If we want to compose based on something that's really strict, we can as well. But let's listen a little bit to how this tuning is coming out on this instrument. can also do some cool things by changing the tuning. Even just with one note, we start to get quite a different effect. Well, enough for my playing around right now. Now that you've heard a little bit of how I'm approaching the 7 equal tuning, I'll talk a little bit about why it might come in different forms. And we talked a little bit about this before, but I mentioned the structure that all of the notes are neutral. So in an instrument like the tambine, for example, that uses this kind of tuning, because it's a flute, we end up overblowing to major thirds. We end up being able to have a perfect fifth, and we kind of get this tone in between all of the tones, which gives us some amount of freedom and also allows us to get close to some of the maqam that's used in music from the Middle East, which tends to use often of these middle thirds. And it gives us a different essence of the dynamism in the scales, because instead of having the major and minor polarity, we have a different type of structure with which we can base things on, and other types of notes. It also gives us a structure where everything is almost equally out. It doesn't have the pull towards the harmonies in the same way as the 5-limit harmonies, the major and the minor's harmony, that really focus on staying on the notes. So if you listen to a lot of music, these different world music, these different music from around the world that have a near 7 equal tuning, there's a lot of movement towards it, and a lot of people have actually claimed that in 12-tone equal temperament, it works having the deviations from just intonation. It works having its built-in mistuning, because it gives the music more motion. Having the beating between tones or having the harmonic interference actually is a positive effect, because it makes the music want to go somewhere, whereas just intonation is always really landing, and it stays on points that keep an amount of staticness and don't want to move. Obviously, these are compositional and aesthetic choices that we can make while composing, while playing, while improvising, while designing instruments, while doing whatever kind of musical creative activity that we want. But this does make some music. If you listen to the chopi music from Mozambique, you'll find that the music is very, very, very dense in movement, and it has a lot of polyrhythms and a lot of polyphony, a lot of instruments happening at the same time, different melodies are happening at the same time. And in a sense, with a 7 equal tuning, there's not that much difference between the consonant of any two intervals and other ones, because we don't have the fourth or the fifth right in tune to give us that pull, that stability. They're quite out of tune in the natural form of it, and it gives some kind of basis, but playing those dyads that are a bit out are not really a part of, they're not a strong part of this tuning. They're too far outside to to really work in the classical sense of the fourth and the fifth. So we don't really have triadic harmony that makes very much sense in this. We also don't have the major or the minor third or the second or the sixth or the seventh. So using these neutral tones, which are closer to maybe 11 or 13 limit harmonies, or harmonies that are based on a cycle of major thirds, maybe if there was a major third to even cycle into that, but in this case being isolated, we can almost think of them as 11 limit or 13 limit harmonies, depending on where we want to place them, what we're hearing, what our experiences of that, or just realize that they're not grabbing onto any readily recognizable just intonation harmonies. So it makes this music continuously have some kind of movement, because the harmonic difference between the different intervals is not that different. So it kind of blurs the consonants and dissonance together, which is quite an interesting factor, because it often we want the consonants and the dissonance to be a dichotomy in the music, so that we have that resolution, we have that tension, and we have that tension and release. So in the 7-equal tuning, we have to find different ways of doing that, because the relative consonance and dissonance isn't something that's necessarily happening from the harmonic movement. It could still happen from melodic movement, it could still happen from rhythmic movement, it could still happen from things like tone color. In playing on a solo instrument, it has to be something different. And of course, the way that I've been playing using an open string with different just intonation tunings is kind of moving a bit outside of that. So to give another example, let's try to tune this into an exact 7-equal tuning, or as much as this instrument will let me. So because of how this instrument is, we tend to get some deviations that are just built into the structure of being a near 7 instrument. So even though we get close to a bit closer. So this is what happens if we try to do a 1-5-1-4 progression as a 1. Here in this 5, for some reason, we're getting a bit closer to a stable harmony. But in the 1, which is almost there, it doesn't. Anyways, thanks for listening. I won't keep going on, I won't keep playing, but as I keep working on this instrument and different tunings, I'll try to share more about findings I have with this instrument, and I encourage you to check out all of those different traditions of music that use a tuning similar to this, and let me know what you think, if it sounds similar, if it sounds related, if you think their tuning deviates more from 7, or if you think that my tuning deviates a bit more from 7, or what you think about this whole kind of 7-note dynamic. I'm curious as to hearing your thoughts. On my Bandcamp page for Nueva Armonia, there's a few pieces for 7 equal for digital keyboard that you can listen to as well, some examples, and there'll be more music coming all of the time. If you want to hear my music on Spotify or other streaming or YouTube, you can find me at Noah Dean Jordan, as well on Instagram or YouTube as Noah Dean Jordan or Nueva Armonia.